Hello. Hi, I'm Markus. It's nice to meet you all. I'm afraid I don't speak any Korean, so you have to bear with me and understand my English. So hopefully, if anyone doesn't understand anything, please raise a hand. I'm happy to repeat what I said. And I've got the pleasure to be here today. Thanks a lot for inviting and having us. Thanks to 핀테크포럼, to D.Camp, Startup Alliance. I'm delighted to be here and talk a bit about what we see in the fintech world out there, what we see in the different ecosystems, and how we as Startup Bootcamp Fintech are trying to boost fintech across all areas worldwide. So the next 15 minutes, I've got the pleasure of introducing different areas we see. Quickly, before I start into the fintech world, you maybe wonder what this German is doing here in front of you with a British accent. So I'm Markus, and I started actually my career in material science and engineering. So I'm a really hardcore German engineer, which worked in the aerospace industry. This is a picture with my first startup. This was in Shanghai when I used to sell suits to German students. So my first company was about selling suits to students. I didn't sell any students. And this was one of my first tailors I hired to produce suits. So I did a fashion startup before, and also then I moved to London to work and started a clean tech startup, so in the energy world. Shortly after that, I tried to figure out what can be done to bridge the gap between startups and the corporate world. Because I was selling to corporates all the time, like long sales cycles. Took me a long time to actually get a deal done with corporates. So it really bothered me, what can you actually do to bridge the gap between startups and the corporates? And that's when I started Startupbootcamp Fintech a year ago with my co-founder in London, Actarius Lolios. And I will tell a bit about it in a minute. But first of all, this is a very important sentence. For all of you here in the room, fintech is happening. Yeah? Fintech is something that you can't ignore, can't avoid, and can't deny anymore. It is something that is happening worldwide. For everyone in the room, startups, regulators, banks, government, it is an exciting movement that is going on worldwide, and we're happy to be and lucky to be part of this. First of all, actually, let's talk about what is fintech. There are many solutions and many definitions out there, and everyone has their own definition what actually means fintech. And I start with a challenging question: is it fintech or is it fintech? So many times we see companies that are actually doing something in the finance world with the technology. And many times we see companies having technology that can be used in the finance and banking world. This can be everything from payments. It can be everything to the back office. It can be something in the cryptocurrency world. It can be financial inclusion, banking the unbanked. It can even go into the whole private and corporate banking, obviously peer-to-peer, which is a big word right now. So we're looking at the whole spectrum of fintech, from insurance to the corporate, to the private banking, to wealth, to even the pension funds that are out there. So fintech is happening all across these areas, and I'm going to talk about a bit what we want to see more and what we don't want to see that much. This is, I guess, payments infrastructure. You see this a lot now in America. This is not just fintech. Fintech is not just payments. When we go somewhere to conferences and we say we do fintech, oh, you do payments. No, we're not just doing payments. Oh, you do bitcoins. No, we're not just doing bitcoins. It is more than that. And I think what we see a lot, and this is kind of the 3 Ds we see in fintech, is one of them is disruption. So we see a lot of fintech startups coming up with disrupting the finance and banking world. We see a lot of startups that are doing something disintermediate certain activities and processes in the banking world. It can be everything from the payments to cryptocurrencies. It can be also just other startups that are building another layer to the existing infrastructure of a banking system. And then lastly, it's a big delusion, so there might be also a few people and corporations that's going to be delusionized very soon. We're very keen, and this is something we see and we say a lot, we're very keen to see 4 pillars within fintech happening soon. One of them is the blockchain technology. So forget Bitcoin, forget the whole currency part of the blockchain. Really think about the technology of the blockchain technology that is happening and will change how we operate and how a bank will operate. As people say, it's similar to the 1990s where the internet started. This is the blockchain today. Secondly, we see more trends in the whole private and SME lending space. So every product that can be manufactured and produced to actually then help the banks to operate more with the private clients, with SMEs, with the lending space. Welcome. Thirdly, sorry, we want to see more in the unbanked world. Just imagine all these markets out there in Southeast Asia, in Africa, where there are people not having any access right now to financial infrastructure. What can you do? What kind of products can you build to provide them with solutions that help these people to actually have access to the infrastructure? Companies like M-Pesa, you might have heard of them, that are giving people through SMS the opportunity to send money. And fourthly, we want to see the boring stuff. We want to see more solutions in the back office of the bank. There's so much inefficiencies going on in settlements, capital markets, in transaction banking, and I think there has to be a lot of potential where startups can change the way the banks operate. These are the 4 pillars. Happy to repeat them again. But this is something we as Startupbootcamp FinTech want to see more and haven't seen much yet. So every startup in the room, pick it up and do something. I really encourage you. So let's talk about ecosystems a bit. So we are here today in Korea, in Seoul, to be precise, to see what is happening in Korea. And we are very pleased that in the last year, Korea has been more and more on the fintech map. We picked it up, I think, last August, where I heard about the government talking about fintech more. We see articles talking about fintech in Korea and how the banks are now getting involved, and startups are coming up. So we decided in December, I think, to come to Korea and really see what's going on here in this ecosystem, and also give startups and mentors opportunity to connect to our worldwide fintech community we have. Nevertheless, I spent a bit of time now to give a few things and insights how I see a healthy ecosystem developing. I'm not coming to say you should do this and this, and I think you should do this and this. I'm just coming to share a few insights, what I've seen in other ecosystems, primarily London, which I was part of in the last 3 years. This is the rainforest canvas. I don't know how many of you have seen this before. This is a canvas that is identifying certain areas that can be used to then say which are the different kind of blocks that drive a healthy ecosystem within a state, within a corporate, within a startup, within a family even. It doesn't really matter. This is something that can be used to identify the areas you should focus on. In our case, and I want to share a bit more about this, I go deeper into the leaders, stakeholders, activities, and resources, and try to explain a bit more what I've seen in London. So London is one of the fintech hubs worldwide, at least in Europe. Besides New York, I would say is the most active ecosystem within the fintech space. And I'll just share a few activities and, as I said, the blocks and the canvas I've seen there. First of all, there got to be leaders. You might have seen these guys before. This is TransferWise, and actually a few people say I look very similar to this one, which I think is true. It's Chris and Kavit from TransferWise. TransferWise is a very, very successful fintech startup in London. They just valued at $1 billion recently. And for the ones who don't know them, it's a remittance startup with a very nice interface. It makes it very, very cheap to send money across borders. They are a very good example and very good ambassador for the fintech ecosystem in London. They attract more startups. They reinvest now the money, the cash they have into fintech startups, are great mentors, and are kind of trying to reiterate the fintech cycle within the community. Then there's Chris Gnirck. Chris Gnirck I recommend everyone to read his blog. Chris Gnirck is running the Financial Services Club, one of the leaders in the fintech world, I would say. I guess, Rob, you can agree. Very inspiring person who knows and who is one of the thought leaders in fintech. He's also based in London. He speaks at conferences. He is very active to drive the fintech idea forward. Then we also have Nextbank, and you want to hear from Rob just after me when I finished what he's doing. So I think it's very important to have these role models in the ecosystem that can really stand out there in the press, in the media, to say this is happening, this is fintech. Secondly, who are the stakeholders? And I'm very pleased to see so many people here today. I didn't expect it, to be honest. That there are stakeholders that have to talk together. And it's the banks, obviously, who have a high interest in finding new solutions. Regulators, it's a very particular topic in itself. Then there are the investors out there who drive an ecosystem forward and bringing new cash in. And at the end of the day, the startups. And I think the startups are the ones that are actually doing the bottom-up approach to drive an ecosystem forward and help to bring in new ideas. In London, there's been a boom now in fintech startups in the last 3-5 years. I think it was counted more than 2,000 fintech startups just in the UK. Most of them are in London, popping up everywhere and anywhere. And it's a great ecosystem where you can meet people who have ideas, who leave the bank and do their own startup, which then brings in the investors who can fund these ideas. And the banks are very much engaged in London with the startups and the investors. The banks are picking it up slowly. The banks in the UK at least have realized, certain banks, not all of them, have realized that they have to be part of this game and have to find out how they can benefit from this fintech movement in London. Certain departments have been formed completely new in the banks, where Lloyds, for example, or Barclays, other huge banks are now getting, with certain divisions, very active to support startups. And I come to this in a minute again. We need to see resources. And I think a very important point are the talents. Who are the people actually starting the startups? Who are out there that can provide feedback to the startups? It's not always just the students who can build the next fintech startup, because apparently fintech is quite a complex area. So it has to be the people, as I said, leaving the banks, going out there and actually building the startup by themselves. They need to be incentivized to then actually leave a bank with a high salary and do the product by themselves. In the UK, there are very interesting tax reliefs available if you are investing in early stage startups. If you're starting an early stage startup by yourself, you have very interesting tax relief. So the government is trying to push this fintech movement forward by giving the right incentives to the right talents. My dream fintech startup, by the way, is a person from a bank who worked there for 10 years, plus a student with an entrepreneurial mindset. If these two meet, an amazing fintech startup could happen, because the student can leverage the knowledge of the banker can leverage the spirit of the young entrepreneur, and they can build amazing things together. This is my ideal combination of a fintech startup. Universities are always playing a major role. They're bringing in the talent, they're bringing in the knowledge and the data and the research that is necessary for startups to actually go ahead. They also can run events. In London, there are going to be many hackathons now at the universities, where engineers or software engineers from the bank meet the young students and they can work on ideas together. I think it has to be an early education already, where students are inspired to start something in fintech and not just go into the other traditional jobs like law and others. Activities, also very important, and it's great to see D.Camp here in Seoul, which has an amazing building and amazing facilities. I think it's important to have co-working spaces like this, where you can meet and have events and venues like this. The accelerators, that's us, for example, incubators, hackathons and meetups. In London, you can go literally every night to meet up in fintech, which can get quite boring because you meet the same people. But on the other side, the conversation is happening. The banks are coming to the meetups. There are events like Next Bank Europe, where you bring in people together to talk about this topic. And it's, again, the conversation that has to happen outside the banking building and the government's building. So lastly, to summarize what I just talked about, we always need three elements for a healthy ecosystem. That's also one of the reasons why we expanded from London to Singapore, because we've seen these three elements in Singapore. One of them is startups. It's an obvious one, because we work with startups. Second one is we need to see investments. We need to see the cash available to fund the growth of a startup. VCs, angels has to be out there to actually help them and kick them off the ground and then make them a big 1 billion company. And lastly, this is actually one of the most crucial parts, is an educated community. Who is out there that can actually provide knowledge to the startups? Who is a mentor? Who can be there to assist with certain questions in the startup. And I think people asked me today about the pitch day we had today here, and asked me, Marcus, what do you think is needed the most? And I think there needs to be more knowledge transferred from the finance world to the startup world. Yeah. There has to be mentors who are working with the startups, investors, angel investors, who are with the startups and say, I think you should focus on this. I work with capital markets. I think you should do this. It's not just a startup by themselves. It's a community that really takes it and takes the startup off the ground. So this is really important for us, and this is something we've seen in Singapore more than other cities right now in Asia, and that's why we started there. The question is now, that's all nice, but what can you actually do? And these are three elements we see, but what actually drives an ecosystem? And we're not the only solution, but I would say Startupbootcamp Fintech plays a very important role to actually build up an ecosystem, as I just described it in my nice little canvas. Startupbootcamp Fintech is one of the leading organizations in the world that is doing fintech with startups and banks. So what we are, I would say, very important, we are the voice of the startups. We are coming always from a startup point of view. We want to build great companies that can succeed and have a growth. Yeah? We are part of the debate. We're not sitting at conferences where just banks talk about innovation and it's all going to happen and payments. And no, we're actually on the other conferences sharing the needs of a startup. We're talking about what does a startup actually is about. What is a startup? We have to educate the fintech community and say, listen guys, we have 10 startups here and they need this. They need to be there. So we're part of the debate, part of a startup. And we are driving fintech globally. I think not that many can claim this, but we are very global. We're here, for example, and we're bringing in certain knowledge to drive fintech. Yep, we are in London, and since 4 weeks, we're in Singapore. So I moved to Singapore 4 weeks ago, very exciting, which is 40 degrees warmer than right now it is here. So a different climate. We are now in these two major fintech hubs to run our acceleration programs. I'm going to talk about this, what actually it is. We always choose 10 startups per year to take them through a program, to our acceleration program. And we believe we pick the top 10 startups that are actually going to change the industry. In London last year, we had 432 applications for the London program, and we picked 10. I expect something very similar for Singapore, more this time from Asia. And we do this acceleration. I don't know how many of you actually know an accelerator. It is a very, very intense 13 weeks program. It's very hands-on, and we make everything happen that a startup actually can survive for 13 weeks. And so I thought, for the guys of you who actually don't know what accelerator is, I will show you a very quick video that summarizes our acceleration in London, and I hope that will work now. So it's not just fun. Maybe it looks like it's a lot of fun. It's a 3-month program, and it's a very bespoke. We sit the startup down at the beginning, say, what do you want to achieve the next 12 months? And we say, let's do it in 3. So it's a very condensed time where if the startup needs customers, we make sure they have new customers. If they need marketing, we give them the certain exposure they need. And especially, we do it with our partners together. So at the end, at the big demo day after 3 months, they are able to raise more money than they would have done without. These are the 10 startups that made it into the last 10 in London. Hopefully you're going to see a few names in the future because they're going to be very big. It's a very diverse cohort. I already mentioned it earlier during the day. We see fintech very diverse, and this is also reflected in our cohort. Inslee is an insurance brokerage startup. Mchanga is a crowd fundraising platform from Kenya. MiniPay, for example, is micro content monetizing. Epifight is a middleware to bridge this banking and the cryptocurrency world. Findlay is a credit score based on social data. So it's a very diverse mix, also very international. We had 9 different nationalities in our cohort. It was very fun, it was very intense to work with these guys. They're all still alive, which is good. And they are now raising an average 1.2, 1.3 million euros after the program. Yeah, we do this now every year in London and in Singapore. We're also doing pitch days. We're not sitting there in London and Singapore to talk about fintech and have the acceleration program. We go around the globe, and actually these are all the locations I've been to in the last 9 months. So all the way to America, across Europe a lot, and we've done pitch days in Asia. One of them was here today in Seoul, where we give startup opportunity to talk to mentors, to pitch to investors, and get feedback especially. We also do hackathons, this 48 hours events, where we bring together designers, hackers, coders, engineers from the bank, startups, to actually work on ideas that are really early stage, so that after 48 hours, lots of pizza, lots of beer, they have a prototype that might actually work and will be startup one day. We do also events, fintech lounges, which is something for later stage startups, to put them in front of investors. But this is now a really important message to all of you here. We're always doing this only in collaboration and support and with the funding of these partners. So we have funded ourselves by the range of these industry players. These are banks. We have Lloyds from the UK. There's an Italian bank. Rabobank is from a large bank from the Netherlands. And DBS is a large Singapore bank who are funding our program with MasterCard, which, as you all know. Avato is a very large German fintech provider. And on the right, we have our funds. SBT is a is a 100 million fund from the Russian Sberbank. And Route 66, a $440 million fund from Washington, D.C., focusing only on fintech startups. And Infocom, as we heard earlier, is the Singaporean government's VC fund. So these range, they fund either the London or the Singapore program to make it happen. So you might ask now, why are they doing this? Why is Lloyds or Rabobank or MasterCard or DBS sponsoring us? For 3 reasons. One of them is access to innovation. They want to understand why is it happening outside the building? What's going on with startups? We hear about this startup world, but actually what's going on? So we give them the access to a wide range of innovation activities, especially within our Startup Bootcamp FinTech program. We say we provide a very safe environment for the startups and the banks to play with. Normally, as a startup, we don't know how to talk to bank, and as a bank, we don't know how to talk to startups. So we have a 3-month program where we make both sides talk to each other. And I think it's very important to say there's a conversation going on between startup and the bank. In London, after 3 months, we had 21 projects signed between our 10 startup and our 7 banks. 21 projects signed in 3 months. Normally it takes you more than 18 months to sell to a bank. But because we have this really intense time and a safe environment with the banks, we make it happen. Banks like exposure. Banks like to be seen as an innovative bank. They want to be associated to startups innovation. So we do a lot to say Lloyds or DBS, they're working with us, which gives them the exposure. The last point is also very important. We drive cultural change in the bank. There is a mind shift happening these days in the bank where things are changing. The C-level management, even down to the engineer, things are slightly changing, and we're driving this change. We're going into the bank to do workshops with the C-level guys. We're running our pitch days in the bank to say, listen, these are startups, they need this, talk to them now. So I would say these are the three main reasons why we have support of the industry players. Just lastly, to finish my presentation, then I'm done. I've talked a lot. Startup Bootcamp is also not just in Singapore and London. We have a lot of other programs across Europe. We are 5 years old. We're in Berlin, in Barcelona, Istanbul, and so on, focusing on different verticals. We have 210 startups in our portfolio. 78 have raised funding, and normally it's 513,000 euros. In our case, because we're fintech and we are in a hype, there's a bit more funding available. We also won an award last year. We are nominated, we're actually voted, the Best Accelerator Europe's. Within Europe, we are very big and very well known. And now also we're doing the same in Singapore. Just basically, the outlook is, just to kind of give you the last message, is fintech will go from local to global. We see more and more products, more and more solutions around the globe. And every time we ask the startup, yeah, it's maybe for Korean market, but how can you scale it to the next level? How can you actually create a multi-billion-dollar company? And so we see more startups now going beyond the local market, adjusting their model for the regulation framework and actually growing bigger. This is great. This is what we want to see. Funding will change. There's more and more funding available for fintech startups from VCs, from angels, from institutions like banks and the government. I think this will have a tremendous impact on the growth of startups and also on the quality of startups. And finally, the banks will change. Who would have thought? It all is going to be not disruptive, maybe that's too early, but it will change. And I think where we come in is that in an ecosystem like this, there's huge opportunities where the banks and other stakeholders can actually talk to the startups. And it was great to see this happening today here in the pitch day we had in Korea in Seoul, where we had the banks and the startups meeting with each other and taking the conversation about fintech forward. So please get in touch. I've got only a few business cards with me. Write down this email address if you want to get in touch, or just tweet me. It was great being here, and thanks a lot. Thank you.